Well, friends, I'm so privileged to be with Lancelot today and interviewing him. We're going to get started and roll along. You're in New York City. How's the weather there? Is it any change from the apocalyptic nature?
Yeah, it is. It is clearing up in a kind of wind water mix. So we should be. Wind. Yeah, that's right. We should be clear.
Rain.
Rain.
Come, Baba.
Yeah, that's true. We should be clear by the weekend. That is Daddy's face on there. Isn't that funny? It's kind of weird on there, isn't it? Daddy's here and there. It's kind of like teleportation.
Well, now you have to introduce us. Like, who's who there?
That's Tara, my wife, and then our little one.
Is it?
So, yeah, there was.
He's saying my name is Arthur.
Thank you.
Arthur.
Yeah. So anyway.
How old's the little one?
Yeah, he's young. So,
Lancelot, man, looking over your resume, it is impressive. You do so much. And foremost, you're a writer. Would you say that's right? Beyond being a musician, a speaker, panelist, do you think of yourself as a writer primarily?
I think so. I think of myself as kind of like a mythopoet. I resonate a lot with George MacDonald. And also, a lot of folks that are trying to make like big iconography and like big archetypes in the ways they speak and think and stuff. And so generally the easiest way that works is through writing. But sometimes words don't work on paper, and so they need music or they need a stage or those sorts of things. And so like even the way, like I have a video game I want to write someday, but I would need, just like with large films, you just have to have such huge teams and budgets. So I just don't have the access to that right now, but it would be the sort of thing that deconstructs almost the entirety of what is violent video games and how they even work beat by beat.
Yeah.
So it would play with a lot of those tropes and archetypes, those sorts of things. So like that, I tend to think of myself that way. But yeah, probably writer is home base. I do everything through that. I filter everything through the trivium, like logic, rhetoric, and grammar, and the way that applies to creative writing. And then that's sort of the intersection of the arts and sciences. So
nice. Speaking of Spark and Echoes, neat intersection between the Holy Scriptures and art. How did you first find out about Spark and Echo?
Man, I actually don't know. I could look at my email.
You've been commissioned with us many times. Do you know when that started?
I could look. My guess is either Matt Guilford of Crew, Daniel Baltzer of the Limner Society, one of the guys at the home office at ACT International, or someone here in town, maybe another sculptor or something. I don't know. One of the people in my network told me about it, and then I met Jonathan and kind of just said, hey, here's what I'm up to. Should I try this? And Brooklyn says hi and yes. And so I gave it a shot, and it worked out really well. And honestly, I've never told you guys this, but I actually, in college as a freshman, I was not like translating, but transposing biblical texts into poetry.
Oh, really?
I did probably 10 or 15 books of the Bible that way. And I've never done anything with that. I actually
like literal translations, or are you?
I would call them transposals. So it was like translation mixed with, because obviously not every book is poetry, and so because of that, when you're jumping from epistle to poetry or from history to poetry, there's a lot of kind of like a capo on a guitar. You gotta rank it up a few registers. So. Yeah, I did that. And so when I was like, great, they're doing something, they're doing it better than me. And I was in the middle of kind of an epistolary mentorship with Eugene Peterson. I both of those things I say probably exaggerate the reality of it. It was like 4 letters with very specific questions I asked him, so, but he actually had done the same project and it went unpublished early on in his career. And so I was just picking his brain.
Wow.
So when I saw you guys were doing this, I was like, this is really, really good. And now I don't have to be the one doing anything, So that's like my utmost delight is when I have a vision for a thing and I find out someone else is already doing it better. It's like, good. Now I can do something else. That would be my preference, is someone else do it better than me. And then I don't have to worry about it anymore.
And you're usually commissioned 2 or 3 times a year. Is that kind of?
Yeah, that's the way it's been. I mean, I'll go as many times as you want to.
You're prolific, that's for sure.
I love it. And what I do is I just take whatever you guys give me in terms of commission and I just throw it straight at cover designs and editors for larger projects, some of which incorporate the stuff. Everything I write is kind of contained in this one megacosm universe. If you think of not necessarily like Marvel Universe or Brandon Sanderson or something like that, but it incorporates stuff happening on Earth too. It's more like a shadow Earth. As a buddy of mine said, southeast Missouri on the moon is what he called his thing. So it's, it's a little, some of the history is different. A lot like what Stephen King does. So it gives me freedom to, play with real things that are happening as well as a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. So,
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
What do you like about Spark and Echo as a whole? I mean, unrelated to your specific genre, but what do you like about it as an organization?
It is the only thing I know of within Protestantism actively and regularly commissioning arts. There are things that people might raise money for a film, but it's like a really glorified small group resource, which is fine. That's a thing, but that's there are, there are churches that, I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration. I mean, there are places that commission arts. I certainly have, like maybe half a dozen colleagues in the city that do that, but they tend to be very on a project by project basis. This seems to be more like on an organizational level, steady, committed to these sorts of things. And so, I think 2 of the big babies we threw out with the bathwater of the Reformation, one is the arts, straight to the marketplace, and the other was the orders. We still believe that marriage is better than singleness, even though Paul says quite clearly that singleness is better. And we have nowhere to offer single people. People experiencing singleness sounds like people experiencing homelessness. So it's even built into the way we think. It's so like we are so broken in the way we think of that. Me at the forefront, but I really do biblically believe that. But the same is true of the arts. And St. John of Damascus said that we make icons because God did. He said Jesus is called the true icon of God. And so we make icons because God did. If you believe that Word became flesh, then you believe that there is nothing so secular that it cannot be made sacred, that there is no secular sacred dichotomy. What there is a perspective whereby you draw nearer or further away to God based on any given thing you interact with. Yeah. And so, a lot of times you'll encounter an organization like, yeah, we want to commission a film, a thing or whatever, but it's really just advertising for a church. Yeah. Or it's glorified like stage performance, which can be kind of Gnostic or even most of the time nihilistic. Yeah. It tears down the body. And, having a body was good enough for God. So maybe we should reevaluate that. And it seems to me that you guys as an organization have made space for that. You respect the text, you respect the art, and you respect the artist. And so I just don't see that being done. Certainly not on a local church basis.
Yeah.
You know, I have a buddy here who's been trying to connect artists with relatively empty Protestant churches, and the only question they ask is, you know, how much rent are you going to pay?
Yeah. Wow.
And so, you know, when you do that, or when you say, hey, we have an art gallery at our church, but then you go in the sanctuary and it's basically a glorified boneyard, to where even the cross is just like a barest, subtlest carving inside of what is more or less a hip bone.
Yeah.
Starts to look like that passage, you know, that's kind of dark and pretty heavy metal. So I think that's a problem. And not even the Jews do this. You know, the OG monotheists are real hard in the paint for Jeremiah 29 and for, you know, that the main Hasidic neighborhood in New York City is right out my window, right here.
Yeah.
Largest Hasidic Jewish community in the world. They have regular Orthodox Jewish rappers that come and perform.
Nice.
And, like, you know, and like good ones, like competing at a high level. And so I don't know. It's just
yeah. Well, as an organization, thank you for that. I think that's square on. As an organization, you know, it's a nonprofit, and to be able to give multiple commissions, we have to raise money, and that's kind of what we're doing at the moment with the Be Part of the Art campaign. Yeah. And from your perspective, you know, someone watching this interview, what's a good reason to give to Spark and Echo?
I mean, the honest truth is, like, if can you hear?
No, I can't.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that I'm trying to think of how to formulate this in a very, very clean way for someone. Like, look, the most of the world you interact with isn't sermons. It's not. Most of the world you interact with is streets and water and air. And even if you lie to yourself and you think that, like, okay, the spoken word or whatever, and I'm a preaching major. Okay. Originally Bachelor of Theology with a major in preaching, minor in like mythology, ancient literature, ancient languages, whatever, like just a hot mess of other stuff. But preaching was like home base for me. So I'm not like anti-preaching at all. I think people need rhetoric. I think understanding how to communicate that way is important. But the reason the Franciscans said, like, you know, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words, like that. that's a simplification of what's actually in the rule of life for them. In their rule of life, it says only preach what you have put into practice, because people will see your life first. And that's actually kind of convicted me, and I've stepped back from preaching because, like, I might be able to honestly deliver one sermon a year. In terms of nonfiction, I think that is what's responsible. Most of things need to be incarnate and real. And so people tend to think like, oh, poetry is this abstraction. No. Math is abstract. Poetry is as concrete as it gets. Poetry is birthing of language made out of like wombs and tombs and apples and, like, you know, that, like, read a poem not long ago. It's like, it's all this stuff right here, you know, just like matchbox and like flames and candles, and like this is all incarnate stuff right here, and this is the stuff of poetry.
Yeah,
you know, like, could we analyze this in terms of abstract math? Yeah, we could. In terms of economic numbers, probably there's a price to this candle. But, like, if you want to have a gospel embodied in the world, you have to put flesh on it.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, what better way to do that than to, like, throw money at a project that's taking the Bible and putting it into paint, poetry, like all of these sorts of things, especially when we're getting ready to live in a world where like the majority of the stuff is like visually at least is made by non-thinking computer chips, you know.
Exactly.
Now I'm saying that as someone who's, you know, used a couple of those for header images and backed away from that. But like the majority of the piece, even that was based on, is all, you know, my own work. So, you know, I admit the inherent irony in that. But the irony is there in the piece to begin with. So I just think it's something that people should prioritize. I think that, you know, if the entire science fiction community is saying no works that are AI inspired, AI prompted, AI generated, none. And that's science fiction. Those are the guys that have set like breaking policy for, you know, ranked choice voting in Maine and New York City. It started at the World Science Fiction Convention. Like those are people that are like, came up with the idea of the Dyson sphere. Those are people that like, from whom all of that one guy who will remain nameless as rockets and stuff are named after. Like, you know, maybe if those people are freaked out about it and like saying, no, we're not going to accept any stories that use this in any way, shape, or form, perhaps we should like prioritize humanizing the arts, because it's called the humanities, and like commissioning people that do that. And good on you guys for making that happen. You know, I work as an artist chaplain in Brooklyn, and so we live off support. I understand that process, you know, asking people face to face, those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, like, cool. In a Patreon world, why not back an entire organization that's doing that regularly? So
yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to give a little speed round. Is it possible for Lancelot to give one-word answers to the following questions? You're a wordsmith. What's your favorite word?
Dandle.
Dandle.
Used in the innocent sense of a father to a son. It is the entire story of the prodigal son wrapped up in a word.
Okay. Where's a place Lancelot wants to go and has never been?
I was asked that when we were talking about Mars in my sophomore year of high school, which was 2001. And I said Mars. And the teacher made fun of me. And I now think that that's probably the case in a Canticle for Leibowitz sense, but I'm not going to work on Elon's farm. So,
all right. Celebrity you love to hate?
I don't know that I hate anybody. I don't know that I hate anybody. You know, if you're asking me whether or not hell exists, I think that there's certain presidential folks that have to go somewhere when they die, but that's as close as I would come to that.
What's your favorite moment of the day?
Dawn. I'm up at 5 every morning when I write.
Oh, wow. Great. What goal do you have for your work? We've got just a couple minutes left. What do you hope? I'll ask two questions. What do you hope for yourself? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you hope your work does in the world? And then what's a hope for Spark and Echo with you? Like, what do you hope we can do or achieve?
What do I hope for my work? What do I hope for your work? And what was the third?
Just two. Yeah, just two.
Okay. I hope for my own work that I can give people the experience someday before I die that Fyodor Dostoevsky gave me with the Brothers Karamazov. It is a remarkable book to read the year your father dies and the year your firstborn son is born. Wow. I wept for about 20 minutes straight after finishing it. I've never had the reaction to any other work of art in any medium. And for Spark and Echo, I would hope that you guys could do another 2 or 10 laps of the scripture, that you would have enough resources that you would be able to return to passages that were dealt with in bulk and start dealing on an even more granular level, and even recommission texts you've already commissioned, so that you have multiple riffs on the same passage. That'd be my hope for you. And eventually, as I've told Rebecca multiple times, I'm probably annoying her with it, I would love to edit a print version of it that includes links to things that you can't listen to in a text, like video, audio, but that generally is actually something you can hold in your hand.
Right.
But you need a lot more passages for that. So.
We do. Yeah. Multiple takes on the same passage. I would love that indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll ask my cheesy question. What are you doing when you feel most alive? This will be last.
I don't know. Sometimes it's when I get in the heat of writing, and I'm actually so there's a resonance that I'm feeling that I know will be echoed in a reader sometime. Sometimes it's barefoot in Greenwood Cemetery by a pond, and sometimes it's, the other day it was taking my kid out on the Wonder Wheel at Coney Island. It was $10 for both of us, and we got up there, and I hate heights, but I hate being scared more than I hate heights. And I was terrified the entire time. It was wonderful because it was actively facing my fears, holding a toddler in my arms who didn't care and didn't know.
Yeah.
So that he can live in a world where he doesn't know that I'm scared is pretty cool.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for working with Spark and Echo for such a long time, artist in residence. I don't even know if I mentioned that at one point, but you're insightful, creative, clever. Your work is stunning. So thank you for giving to us, and blessings on you and your family.
Yeah, man.
And on Spark and Echo.
Yeah, thanks. And you be whole. And folks may not know, but I had a book called Least of These Least that came out for the audience that you're around. So that might be something people check out. But.
Yeah, we'll be sure when we post this interview, we'll be sure to mention that.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you. Hopefully I gave you something to work with.
Well, hope we have clear skies in New York.
Clear skies, noisy streets, all as well.
Nice.